Hello, Andrew here. Welcome to the Lecture 5 of the Designing Digital Content and Youth Work module. This is the practical element to Lecture 5. And Lecture 6 will continue on with a practical as well, covering video editing, much like we did with the image processing earlier. So within this quick kind of tutorial lecture, I'm going to just outline, just orientate you around one particular free open source video editing tool, and then just much like the other image processing one, just describe the similarities that happen across the board, just in terms of reading the interface and the terminology to go with it as well, and just have you kind of comfortable with that. In the second half of this, we'll get some kind of more consistent elements that we can put together into a video. And again, much like the last one, we leave this practical with a view to you going away, having a think of where you could source relevant images or content or sounds of something that might be of purpose and use to yourself or any of the groups of young people you might work with. Okay, so what I have been using is, sorry, let's get rid of that. This OpenShot video editor is the one that I'm going to use today. But again, there's, as we spoke of previously, there are any number of them that could be used. There was a Google app version, which was another one that I was looking to use earlier, called, so let's put this in the middle, Open Movie Studio. There is a free version, and then kind of comes with a watermark for the project, for the product itself. But you can kind of, for a fee, you can unlock that as well. Again, there are a number of other free ones there. I have a list here of OpenShot being the one top of this sort of list, but all I've done here is just put best free video editors into a Google search. And there's a number of ones that have come up. And again, you'll see something quite similar now when I start to kind of delve down into it with the OpenShot one. But they pretty much have a very similar layout of just importing your files somewhere where you store them, like a library, and you can kind of reference them and work from them, to timeline where everything happens in a fashion of laying them out linearly. And then obviously the settings for saving and kind of putting it elsewhere. So, there's any number of ones. Something like this is probably, it's a little bit more advanced in one regard. It looks like there's just, from the interface, there's more options or ways to kind of select stuff. But in essence and in principle, they're all doing the exact same job. So we don't really need to concern ourselves with that too much. So yeah, once we use this OpenShot one, if you click on their site, you'll see there's a link to a download for the free version of the app, and you can just, again, you can have it if you're working on Windows or OS X or Linux. You can have any version of that. It'll just kind of recognize what machine you're trying to install it from, and doing it from there really. So let me see. Okay, I have it here. I have it opened, and this is what you get. So again, pretty much the same, where we have a browser here, or where you can just kind of we load files in here, different project files, and we'll get different sort of effects or things that can go on that as well. But the project files will be here. So from here, you can drag it into your timeline, and once you have a file in your timeline, you'll be able to view it in your viewer. And this is the one where you just kind of play back all the different changes that you're making. Again, much like the image editing, we can just kind of change this setting around to suit ourselves, or whatever we might, whatever need we might have it to, we might require it to do. So yeah, we can do that as well. I just want to check up here really quick just to show you I hope you can see this. But we have the preferences is kind of an important menu when it comes to the initial setup of a video editing project, and can kind of knock a lot of people just in terms of the file format, or even the frame rate that your video is recorded is. It can cause problems with playback if you don't have the settings calibrated properly. Again, not to worry about, there's a list of things that need to be done, but you'll find out very quickly if you're using the same device, be it a phone or a camera, and you're plugging it into the same computer. Once you set this once using those tools, you won't have to set it again. It's if you are using other video recorders, and they might produce video with a different codec, as we would have discussed in the terminologies earlier. You might just need to fix a couple of issues around that, just to make sure that they're all reading in the same timeline if you're reading multiple sources of video from different places. So yeah, again, if we look here, we just have the preferences pane, file, open, new, save as, and export. That'll all happen from here. Import files here as well. Edit is just a very general one of just clearing the history and the preferences that way. Title, you can just put in an animated title from there. I'm sure there's again, much like Photoshop or the other image processing ones, we'll find that there's a number of different ways to do the same thing, and we'll just kind of look at those as we go along here. Just different sort of view of options of how you might want to display the toolbars and the whole layout of the app itself. And that's just something you'll find a way, you know, like the way I'm at the dragging the video, sorry, the timeline to fit in more of the timelines, where we just kind of dragged it from here. But again, you'll find what works for you, where if you want to kind of zoom in and have this really, really detailed, or if accessing the viewer and just kind of looking at the preview is something that you prefer. There's just all sorts of different options to do that, really. Let me see, and then just a search for tutorials or, you know, different sort of things. So let's look at this preferences tab for a minute and we'll see what we get. So there'll be a general default way to do that, including the layout of the theme here, which is we can just change it to something else. In terms of the color of it, I'm assuming it's going to do that. But, you know, I just want to get into the video settings really of this, just to see what we're looking at. So as a default profile, we have a HDV, which is a high definition 720 resolution with 24p, which is 24 progressive frames. So 24 frames a second, which would be a PAL format. NTSC is closer to 29 and 30 frames a second. And that would just be something, you know, you'll know from where you're working from. Most of Europe would be PAL region. America, I believe parts of the, I believe Australia is NTSC as well. We can just do a search on that really quickly while we're at it, because we can just go NTSC regions. So if we look at we look here, we'll see something. So these are all the regions that PAL region covers mostly Africa, most of the places barring America, essentially, which is still NTSC standard. So, you know, that's just something to be aware of, the difference in that. But it's mostly we'd want to set this at the beginning. So 1080 would be a larger HD version. HDV will be slightly smaller, although there is a 1080 HDV setting here as well. But essentially, it's the combination of the definition of the video file you have, the frame rate that you have it at, and the aspect ratio that you want to present that in. Because you could have, you know, as we see here, we can have a 1080 50 frames a second HD project, or we could also have sorry, it's further down here, but there's a 1080 720p one, so it'll be a smaller aspect ratio with the same properties on it. So for the purposes of this, I'm going to set a HD. Actually, I'll set it as at 720. If I just pull that down a little bit, you might be able to see what I'm doing there. If I set this to a 720, 25 frames a second project, that should do us. So if we have that, Much with the audio, likewise with the audio, it's just that the greater the sample rate, the bigger the file, the more fidelity that the sound will have. So this is something that if it's something that is really vital for it, you're going to have to. The next thing we'll be learning about compression stuff. We can get at that later on, but the ideal is to work with the best possible versions of whatever you have, especially if it's stuff you've recorded yourself. So there will be a little bit of back and forth of you learning to understand the settings when it comes to the editing, and then being aware of the settings on your devices. So if you had, for example, a separate audio recorder device, it would ask you, do you want to configure it to 44 or 48 hertz recording, or else something with a higher fidelity again. But mostly these two would be the standard. And it's just a case of making sure that you have those settings matched when you're importing it, so that you can kind of save discrepancies. But to be honest, they're not the biggest deals. They're things that you'd notice if it was a problem fairly quickly, and it would be easy to fix it. Or otherwise, you can get notifications with some telling you that the sound and the image are not aligned as per the originals. Would you like to do that? So that's another kind of way around it. So not to get bogged down in that too much, I just want to draw your attention to it. So we leave it as a 44 one, and then you can have stereo, surround sound, or just mono channels. But again, stereo would be kind of standard, so we leave it at that. Now, this is something that's kind of useful in terms of just having different autosaves, especially with editing in something you've done a lot of work on and you're not sure if it's going to work. But, so you make 5, 6, 10 different changes to something, be it the speed that it's being played at, the order that the clips are being arranged in, or just, trying to get some sort of tone or something that's working, or you just want to experiment with something. So you have a certain limit to undoing things, which is kind of helpful for that. And, or you can do it by minutes, or you can do it by the two, really. So what it will do is it'll save a cache of autosave files of versions of your project, in this instance 20, but that can be increased or decreased. And it will store them in a location on your computer where you can just kind of go back through the, like a time machine almost. You can go back to the project at a particular place. Or likewise, if for some reason, be it a discrepancy with the quality or format of the file, or just some other more general issue about a RAM issue, or the program or the computer crashing, that you can go back to a previous save of the project without having to worry about losing a lot of work that you might have done. That's something where, leaving it as this default and leaving it enabled is a really good idea, especially starting out. And then after a while, you get an idea of what you need to do with that. So the catch is, again, you have different ways of how much memory you would like to, like the RAM that you want to give to the machine, or with the disk, so the amount of disk space. So for example, this is something that's going to fit in directly with the autosave, because obviously, you want to have enough room for video files and larger sort of files that they have a place on your disk, really, to be reading from. And again, there's certain limits that you can put on that. So we have, in this instance, it's memory, and the catch limit is set at 250 megabits. If we change that to disk, let's see, nothing changed, which is unusual. So let's see. But the catch limit there for disk would be quite low, because 250 megabytes isn't going to get you very far with a video file. So that's something you might want to change to a larger amount of time. But for the moment, we'll just leave it at RAM, because that's just going to show how it's going to play back okay. And we'll assume that it's just going to keep, we're not going to worry about, we just assume there's enough room in the hard drive for a small project that we're going to run now. These things become real issues if it comes to like a larger project or a longer, say anywhere between 7 to 20 minutes or longer. Then you really need to consider these things up front. But if at the moment, we're just going to import a small video and change the soundtrack of it and put some text on it, much like we had done with the image processing software earlier, where we'll just see the elements combined, and then we might get a bit creative in the next one. So let's see, debug mode. I have not much clue what that's to do. It's literally just reporting back to, if you want to report an error with the software, and there's a port that will go through. I assume that's what that is. The keyboard, again, much like the view and the layout, you'll get an idea of what's working best for you. But as you can see very quickly, this will give you a shorthand to all the different shortcuts. So if you want to add another track here, Control-Shift-T will do that. But again, you can change that to something which would suit you better. Likewise, if you want to, you can just read through these really and you see all different. So fast forward and reverse, these are kind of handy things eventually, which I'll probably be referencing this in another little while, just to make sure that I'm finding. So pause play JKL is kind of like a standard little shortcut for it's called scrubbing through footage, and all that would really mean is if I hit the L, I'm going frame by frame through that. And if I hit the J, as you can see here, I'm going backwards frame by frame through that. And if I hit the K, it's just kind of going literally frame by frame forwards as well. And if I just want to play that, it might be because I've no image selected in there. But anyway, we'll see how we go now. Okay, so then if we look in here again, we see we just have the same sort of settings where there's a new project there, but we can also access it here. Open projects, likewise here. We can do that, and then saves, and then important footage. So again, like I said, there's our first instance of having two ways to do the exact same thing. So export and video, and if we just leave a hover over it, it'll give us that shortcut as well. Changing the full screen, choose profile, import video. So this essentially is everything that you would see in this tab, okay? And again, this is something, just to kind of speak briefly about other image processing, be it Final Cut Pro or Premiere Pro or something like QuickTime Movie, or another one that you might be Media Player, something like this. It's essentially all the same, that we have these sort of options to preferences to set your project so you have all the master settings for it. Importing, save, and exporting. All those things would be under File or your recent projects if you had some over. And then edit, undo, or redo, Command Z, Command Y, much like every other sort of program. So that would be like the step backwards through the history. And then the title there, but there'd be other like effects tabs and stuff like that. But essentially all ending with view, different sort of layouts, something to do with text, editing, and there would be one to do with effects or whatever like that, and transitions. But as we see, we have that down here. So there's like, short links to those as well. So I'm just going to import a video file. I'm not going to take too much longer than this, but I just want to call up that original folder that we would have had previously, where we were looking at the video. I have the Mars Showcase free thing that we downloaded there, and just again, just some sort of generic track. So I'm going to import the two of them, and we'll just see if we can kind of get them working in the timeline here. So yeah, I'll do that, and then I'll explain the tracks and kind of a few finer details of that. So let's add an image, and it's looking for that. Let me just find where I have that. Okay, so I've located that folder, and there's our clip. It's an MPEG-4. Let's see, it's 1280 by 720, okay? So it's a little bit bigger than the 1080 project, or the 720 project I have set. We'll see how this comes in, if there's any issues with that. So if I go to project files, there we go. Mars Showcase is showing up straight away. So if I drag that in onto a track, we see there, and there we have our image already. Okay. So just to make sure, we play it back. Okay, so there is our image. Now, as you can see, there's what we learned very quickly about digital editing, where it used to be with like old reel-to-reel film editing. If you think of old film photography cameras, the 25 frames a second or 30 frames a second or 24 frames a second is literally like that, the old photography reel, or an old cine reel of Super 8, if you're familiar with anything like this, where it's literally 24 seconds, or 24 different frames that are projected a second, but they're still images giving the illusion of movement. It's the exact same scenario here when it comes to when it comes to video. And that's all we look at. So that when we're looking at our frame by frame, we'll see very quickly, if I just go one by one, see it's letting, if I hit L, it's kind of fast forward now, as we can see. So if we want to just go, I'm just going to hit the cursor to see if that will do that. But we go one frame at a time, it'll update that, and we can see, if we look over here, we can see that change. So that's what we're looking at in terms of the image. And it's a case of very quickly we see how it's all this is gets really kind of fun to play with, where you can break down what is going on with it, you know. Firstly, I want to bring in the audio, and then we'll look at those sort of details, and I'll describe them in more detail. So here's our audio file, just more generic thing, won't make sense, but that doesn't particularly matter right now. And again, I'm just going to drag that into a file. So we see here, we get some sort of thumbnail describing what property the file might have, with the musical notes indicating that this is an audio track, and likewise with this indicating that we have like a film track. So what I want to do next, okay, if I right click on the tab, I get an enormous amount of different options that can go on here, be it fades and animation. So a lot of the effects that I would have described would be in the top bar in other menus, are actually located either here between the transitions and effects, or else on the actual clip itself. So we can do a lot of changes here. So for example, if we wanted to, I don't know which I've selected there, let me select this. If we wanted to change the time of the audio track to make it sound faster, let's see if we can do that. So you see the track is lengthened significantly. And here we have different settings for just adding and removing tracks and doing different things to it. So I just want to see if we can separate this one for us. Yeah, separate the audio, which is kind of comes in as compressed. So we separate the audio from that. We see now what has happened. We get some sort of, let me just delete that. So here's our Mars audio, I believe, is here. Let's just ditch that. And we'll play this to see if there's any sound. So we can see that the audio settings are being removed from that, just with that right click. So this allows us to kind of break away and isolate different elements. Before we go much further, I just want to play this sound just to see how fast it actually is. Okay, so you see that's not really what we'd want to use at all, so we can just reset it. Or again, like we said, we can do our edits undo, Command Z, where we can step back, because I'm kind of making a mess of a few things on purpose. So there's two tracks that come in with the audio there. So if I just delete that one, I'm just going to clean this up a little bit because we have a lot of tracks open that we don't particularly need. So yeah, mostly it's just good practice to close out the tracks that you don't particularly need, because it's as easy to add other ones, you know, as you go. So, or even when you try import a clip, it will do that. So, sorry, just to pick up on where I was a little bit earlier, where I was talking about the frames per second. So essentially, that old film, if you can still go back to that picture of like the film strip, or you know, something which would work in a sequence like that, was known as destructive editing. So what you do is you'd have someone there with a scissors and some tape, cutting and splicing the footage together. But it was an artifact, like there was a physical thing, which was the film, that you would have. If you cut it, you're destroying that essentially. It's more of a craft-based thing. So you have to be kind of aware of that if you were going to damage it, and just being careful and cautious with how you would assemble this material. And that was the craft of editing. Since the onset of, you know, digital technologies, we have non-destructive editing, and that's something that will just no matter how many times you try delete it or to break it or to do anything with it. So we just we're going to slice that there, and we just got rid of everything on this side of it. But if we just kind of go, we can pull this out again and it's all there again. So it's not, there's no destruction to the actual clip, because all we're doing is referencing the clip that we brought in here, or these clips, and all they are doing in turn is referencing the original clips that we have stored elsewhere. So you never damage this actual file. You're just playing with the version of it, and that's something where whenever you're ready to output it, it just references these original clips and then gives you a new kind of copy of those while not touching the originals like that. So that's something to kind of get a bit of confidence from. That it's quite difficult. Once you know where everything is located, it's actually very difficult to destroy the footage, or you'd literally have to delete this file off your hard drive and then you've got a problem. But if you exported a version of this before you even did that, well, then you'd have some kind of copy of it. So, take some kind of heart from that you had this non-destructive process. It allows you, and it kind of encourages you to be very experimental with a lot of it, So I'm not going to talk too much more on this. I'm just going to import the audio. I believe that's still done. No, so we see that audio came back in when I undid the steps. So I'll go back in here and we'll separate it into, I don't know what the difference in single clips and multiple clips is. Okay, well that's kind of strange. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but anyway. So I'll just undo that for a second. And we'll separate into multiple clips. I didn't do it again. Separate into single clip. Let me see if I add a new track. Will that allow me to do it? So I'm just doing edit undo to get it back to the original. Then I'll add these tracks and see if anything happens with this. Separate audio into each channel by itself. Okay, so it hasn't worked, but anyway, we can see there, normally what would happen with most files that you'd have, that you download, where you'd have stereo sound, which is the two channels here, so a left channel and a right channel, and then the video, and that's essentially what you have with every image like that. So when you do try break it down, it will give you two separate audio tracks. In this instance, you can kind of manipulate them each separately, where in other video editing programs, they would be grouped. And if you did one thing to one, it would do it to the other, be it the volume or some sort of setting if you wanted to shorten it or lengthen it. So that's just something to know about that. These are things we get at in the next lectures on just audio itself. But for now, we'll just assume that this is like how the channels work with that, okay? So I'm just going to delete those two because we don't want them anymore. We've decided we want to put this with some different music. We'll see what it looks and sounds like now. We're getting some weird flickering effect over there, which I'm not sure where that's come from. Give me a second. Let me see if there's anything on there. Okay, so we see that this is run the full length. Let me see if I can shorten this down. So yeah, this at the top here, we can just see a little shorthand. Again, there should be some view, zoom in, zoom out settings. It's, just it's using this browser. Actually, I've tried to do it just now. So that would just zoom where we see at the moment, this timeline we have is 6 minutes 10 long, which we don't really need because the longest clip we have is the this Terida audio one, which is, if we get to the end of it there, 2 minutes 52 long, okay? So we don't even going to need that. So I'm going to shorten that down to the length of the Mars one, and then we'll just play around with it from there. But just to show you that this is all we're looking at here, this one here is called the Playhead. So wherever that is over, that is that's where it's playing from. So you can kind of speed it up and go further into the clip and play it from there. Likewise, we hit the J, we can go backwards with it. And if we hit it twice, we can go faster. And we hit it a few times, it goes even faster. And if we hit pause, it'll stop. And then we can just play it again by hitting the space bar. Sorry, the space bar is the pause and play button. Again, these are things which are kind of common across all video editing packages as well. JKL being the shortcut to go back and forth, and the space bar to play and stop. The only reason I can think that flickering is happening on screen is just the order that the tracks are aligned in. So maybe that is having some effect. So I'm just going to delete this and we'll see what we get there. Remove that track. It seems to have got rid of the flickering effect. So that was the layer order of the video being above that. Seemed to be some sort of issue with that. But I just want to kind of bring this back in just to see if we can get it working. Okay, so the audio is there. Okay, so we have something there. It's not very good. I want to turn the volume of this down as well so that we can we just want to reduce the level down to something, say half that. So it's coming up as a percentage there, but we have that shortened. So it's a little bit quieter. Okay, so just within here, we see within the these other headings here where we can add another track. This is the timeline. So these are effects that just work on this. Snapping is kind of, again, something which is kind of across all the back. The magnitude just shows you. So if you're working, because like if we get in really close on this, we can see that we get down to like literally one frame and then another frame. So you can get really, kind of specific about once you're doing it well, like something like this where it's, it's gone over 1, 2, 3 frames. So we'd want to kind of have them the same length. So for this one, selecting the layer is much like the Photoshop or the image processing stuff where we select the layer. Here we select the track. So here we're on track 0 and we can see that's indicated by here. And if we hit slice and we want to go keep left side is what comes up there, and we get rid of everything after that. So now we see we've got 2 clips that are essentially the same length. But what would happen if we had the snapping on, we'd see that this kind of creates a little bit of a magnet effect where it just drops it to the closest place that we'd have and lines up our clips for us rather than letting them kind of wander all over the place. It just makes it a little bit stickier. So it's just handy when you're trying to line stuff up. That's the best way to go with that. So let's see what else is on here. Here we just have the razor tool, which will allow us, again, like the traditional editing packages, cut and paste with destructive ones, where we can just kind of take a razor to this at a number of places and, delete a few bits like that. So say on the video, this will be more noticeable when we look at the next cut, because we can divide this up into the different cuts exactly as they happen. So I'm just going to keep scrubbing through this footage until I see an edit, which should be coming up pretty soon. And then we're just going to just do a quick edit of that. So let me see if I can zoom out for a start. No, I picked a track. Okay, we want to get rid of this logo at the start of it. That's what we'll do. I happen to pick a track without any edits. That was good, wasn't it? So let me see. If we select this first. And then we want to do that. That's interesting. I'm not sure why it's not letting me cut this shot for some reason. I don't know if that's to do with the layer order as well. So as we can see, we're well able to make these changes to the keep both sides. So that should do it. Okay, so we have a clip there. I'm not sure why it wouldn't let me do it from the tool, but anyway, we'll sort that again. I'll get all these issues next time. I just want you to kind of get an idea of what it is. So now we've kind of shortened it and we've cut off the beginning of that clip. And that's it. Okay, so all we're looking at here then, previous marker or next marker, is just we don't have any markers set, but if we did, it would bring us to them. And markers are just little notes that you leave to yourself on it. If you want to just kind of, if there's an area you need to work on, or there's something which is kind of, you know, you have titles or you have a note left for yourself of something needs an effect or needs the sound to be looked at, where you just include a marker on that, and that would assist you in doing that. So that's pretty much it. Again, you can bring in still images, which we might do later. I might put some images and text together. But essentially, you're just taking in video and audio. If it's found source stuff or even stuff you've shot in your camera, you might have like just the audio track turned on, even though you want to record a voiceover or something separately or put music on it. So you just delete those audio channels just to save you room and save you confusion. And then all of a sudden you can start playing around like this and bring in different elements together. But essentially it will be images. It could be a number of images. So just one thing further of the non-destructive editing, even though you can't delete the file, you can also can add as many tracks as possible to this. So this could go up to 99 in terms of the number of tracks that you'd have overlaid. Obviously, relying on the memory and just it being a bigger file and something like that, you know, the computer will find it harder to process. But essentially, you can just duplicate it, or likewise, just taking the same clip and copy the clip, making a new track, and then pasting it in further on. And there you go, right? So we've just got the exact same piece of information there. So this is non-destructive editing, where we can just duplicate that and duplicate it again, like I said, without ever damaging the original clip. So that's pretty much it. Again, like I said, we just get a bit more creative next time. If you could just have a think in between of different elements that you might want to bring in to the timeline here. Be it just a piece of video that you have on your phone, or found footage, or it might be something with the organization you work for, and there's a video that you might want to do, a promotional video, or there's an older one with, you know, there's footage without sound or anything else, so you might want to record a voiceover or just put music over images, or still images even. You can just bring still images into this and put it to music. And as I said, with everything, just turn it to something productive for yourself and your organization, rather than just being additional hard work now, because the best way of learning is to do things that you're enjoying yourself and have some sort of purpose and are saving you a bit of a time and a headache with it, really, you know. But I do recommend this tool. As I said, I've only used it, you know, just in researching this project, but for a free piece of open source, it's pretty durable. There's all these settings here is all you really need for any purposes, really. You've got all the settings here of different sort of, you know, up to HD and 4K, even stuff that would go on in a cinema. You can edit that sort of scale of stuff on this. So your only issues is the computing power of your computer, the RAM, and how much you can load, and how much space or hard drive space you have to store your original files. Barring that, this is the tool for you. So I'll leave it there. As I said, have a think about what you might want to do in the next lecture, and then I'll do the same, and I'll come back on. We'll do something a little bit more purposeful and a little bit more creative around that. And yeah, just get familiar with the tools in between there, and please fire me an email if you have any questions whatsoever, or any trouble accessing this or getting it working for yourself. Okay, talk to you very soon. So bye.